Hey everybody, Den Haring here. Welcome back to my channel, Fish Den 365. On today's episode, we're going to take you fishing. It's springtime now and it's bass time. It's time to go out after these bass. You know, they're sensing that it's time to move up in the water column, to come up shallow, and it's probably the easiest time of the year to catch a giant bass, because this is a time when they have to come shallow if they want to spawn, and so they become more vulnerable when they move in. It's as simple as that. So yesterday I was out on the water, and the water was actually cooling down a little bit because we had some warmer days, and then when I was out yesterday there was a north wind, a stiff north wind blowing the entire day, and the water temperature actually went down. You know, I was out on Wednesday and we found water temperatures up as high as 57, 58 degrees, but not the case when I came out this time. I was in a different section of the lake, but it still should have been, I still would have liked to see that 57 degree water temperature, but the highest temp we found was 53.5 degree water temp. So that meant that the fish might become a little more sluggish, but they certainly were still catchable, as you'll see in the video. So, you know, I thought about, well, how do I want to present this? And I think the best way to do it is to show you some of the baits that I like to throw this time of year, because it's really about moving and covering water. Now, this isn't, for me, this isn't the time of year to be fishing extremely slow. You know, unless you have to, you know, there's certain cases where you might have to throw a Senko because the fish are just hunkered down, and that happens in the spring when you have that colder water taking place again before the next warm front comes through. But overall, as that water temperature is coming up, the fish are moving up and they're wanting to feed. They need the energy to spawn, and so it's a really good time to cover a lot of water and to just fish the bank. Just throw the bait at the banks and throw it at objects and cover water that way. It's a matter of finding the areas where the fish are. And that's as simple as, if you know where the fish spawned, if you saw fish spawning, and you remember where we live here in Pennsylvania, you're not allowed to fish for spawning bass, so please don't do it. We like to protect those fish, make sure they spawn and keep the fisheries going. But it doesn't mean you can't go out and observe and see what's going on. So if you see fish spawning, then you know where they're probably going to be spawning again next year. And you can kind of start to look at the lake and the lay of the lake and figure out, well, where did they come from? You know, did they, if they're in the back of a cove, well, maybe they stopped at a secondary point before they got back there. And before they got to that secondary point, maybe they were on the main lake point or off on a drop off. So you can kind of follow them in your mind, how they come in, and then after they spawn, where they may start to disperse and go back out. And you can kind of figure out where fish are that way. But the way to deal with this now is, as they're coming shallow, is to fish shallow, fish a lot of water, cover different water. If you find a fish, make sure that you're trying some different presentations, because some presentations may work better than others on a particular day. Every day could be different, so it's worth experimenting with that. I did that yesterday. You'll see I caught fish on 2 different lures. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But before we get there, let me just show you. I have 8 rods rigged here. This is what I actually took with me yesterday. And any one of these baits could have caught fish at this time of the year. So the first rod I had here rigged up with a spinner bait. This is just a simple Nichols half-ounce spinner bait, and I have a little swim bait attached to that spinner bait. That is a Mega Bass Hazadong shad that I've attached to the back of that. Last year I had a really good spinnerbait day, and you just never know. It depends on when you're fishing. But once that water temperature gets in the low mid 50s, these baits start all coming into play. This one's one of my favorite ones to throw, especially if the water's a little clear. It's just a belly weighted hook with a Kitech Swing Impact Fat, 4.8 inches, and I also put a jig skirt on the top of it. And I like to throw this around in clear water. It tends to catch big fish. I had a couple bites on this yesterday and missed them. They short hit it in a fallen tree that I threw it in. This is a bread and butter bait that you should always have available. It's just a simple jig. I like to throw a white jig in spring because I think a lot of times the fish may be feeding on shad, and the shad are a little slow in that cooler water, so there's an advantage that they have. So I like to throw a white jig, and this one I'm going old school on. I actually put a tube on the back of that jig. That's a good trailer for people who may not know, especially when the water's still pretty cold. In the summer, I probably would go away from the tube and use something with more of an action tail that is more likely to be more active in the water when the water's warm, like critters would be in the water when the water's warm. But when the water's cold, this tube really has a really nice action to it. It's a little more subtle, and it's how other living organisms are moving around in the water in those temperatures. Caught a lot of big fish over the years on a jig with a tube as the trailer. Next up, we've got a square bill crankbait. In the waters I fish, I like to choose square bills that don't have any rattles in them. This one's a Strike King square bill. That's one of my favorite colors to throw in the spring. Probably the oddball in this lineup is this lure. This is an old school lure that I like to throw this time of year. It's a glide bait, one of the first glide baits ever made. It's a cotton cordell blue striper, a smaller glide bait. But sometimes this thing could be dynamite under the right conditions, especially with smallmouths. But it catches largemouths too. This is another bread and butter bait for this time of year, especially when the spinner bait isn't quite getting hit the way you want it to. It's just a jig. It's just a swim jig. I just have a jig here with a Kitech 3.8-inch swing impact fat tied to it. Looks like a little alewife or a little shad. Hard to beat this thing day in and day out. It catches fish. We got 2 more baits to go. Can you guess what they might be? One of them is a jerk bait. If you watched my video from last week, you saw me catch a big one on the jerk bait. That was a fish that was moving up from deep water, and he decided to grab this thing. Always want to have jerkbait ready in cold water. Sometimes it's the only game in town. Sometimes you can't get them to bite anything else but that. And last but not least on my lineup here, and there's one other bait that I don't have that I certainly want to talk about after this one. But this is a chatterbait, and you've got to have this bait at this time of year as well. This thing is a killer bait. This is a Z-Man jackhammer chatterbait. I think it's the best one that's made. It's a little expensive, but it really catches fish. As soon as you begin moving the lure, it goes right into that vibration pattern. And I put a Jean LaRue biffle bug on the back of it, and that tends to be a really nice trailer because that tail wiggles along with the chatterbait. And then finally, one last lure that I would recommend that I don't have tied on any rod, but I was able to put it on one of my other rods if I thought I needed it, is a lipless crankbait. This time of year, you gotta have a lipless crankbait ready to go because sometimes that's the only game in town. And so you want to be able to be ready with these kind of lures. This sampling of lures here is probably one of the best samplings you'll get for springtime fishing when that water is starting to move in through the 50-degree range into the low 60s, through the low 50s, right through the 50-degree, right through mid-50s, high 50s, into the low 60s. All of these baits can be the ticket for catching that fish, that bass of a lifetime, and multiple other fish when you're doing this springtime fishing. So let's take it to the water. We'll show you how we did yesterday. Chatterbait.
Nice little chunk. Just lost a good chatterbait one. He was hooked much better than I thought. Not a bad one. Square bill. Alright. Yeah, I was fishing it slow. Oops. Geez, that's not good. Picked up a guest here, folks. My brother Martin fishing with us.
Well, I might have been in your way there.
Nah, it doesn't matter. See a fish. We're gonna get more.
Oh yeah, it works good with.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going right against the bank.
So everyone knows the Fort Lewis rules.
A lot, not everyone.
Too much information sharing.
Studies. You read the magazine. I had one on.
Just got another one here.
Was it on? It came on. The battery died, but it came on. Uh-oh. There's more in here. We're going to fish this whole thing.
Like we said, that bite was a bit more tentative yesterday than it was just a few days earlier. A few days earlier, they were really hitting the lure and almost jerking the rod out of your hand. Kind of hit some of them. That was not the case. I had one bite that was strong like that yesterday. The other ones were just kind of felt like mush. The lure just got heavy, set the hook, and that was that. We caught fish on two of the baits that I showed here. We caught a good one on a chatterbait, and then lost another good one on a chatterbait, and then most of the rest of the fish. All of the rest of the fish came on a square bill crankbait, and we lost a few on that as well. So that, both those baits are similar in my mind because they have that vibration, and the water was not, I wouldn't call it muddy, but it wasn't clear either. It was a pretty good stain to it, and oftentimes those vibrating baits tend to shine when you have a strong stain in the water like we did yesterday where we were fishing. Well, I hope that helps you in your springtime fishing. If you thought the video was helpful, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. Hit that like button. That helps me get my videos out to more people. If you haven't done so yet and you enjoy my content, please subscribe to the channel. Greatly appreciate it. Looking forward to giving you more content soon. I have two things coming up. I still need to do the soft plastic review of my lure collection, so I'll be doing that soon. And then we've got another Top Water Tuesday coming coming right around the corner. Looking forward to getting out on the water again soon. Hope to see you out there. As always, be safe, and may God bless your fishing endeavors.